You give life, you are love, bring light to darkness. You give hope, restore every heart that is broken. Great are you, Lord. It's your breath in our lungs. Pour out our praise, pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs. Pour out our praise, only. You give life, you are love, bring light to the darkness. You give hope, you restore the heart that is broken. Great are you, Lord. It's your breath. It's your breath in our lungs. Pour out our praise, pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs. Pour out our praise to you only. It's your breath in our lungs. Pour out our praise, pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs. Pour out our praise to you only. Singing all the earth. All the earth will shout your praise. Our hearts will cry, these bones will sing. Great are you, Lord. All the earth will shout your praise. Our hearts will cry, these bones will sing. Great are you, Lord. All the earth will shout your praise. Our hearts will cry, these bones will sing. Great are you, Lord. It's your breath in our lungs. We pour out our praise, pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs. Pour out our praise to you only. It's your breath in our lungs. Pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs. Pour out our praise to you only.
Now when Jesus heard this, he withdrew from there in a boat to a deserted place by himself. But when the crowds heard it, they followed him on foot from the towns. When he went ashore, he saw a great crowd, and he had compassion for them, and he cured their sick. When it was evening, the disciples came to him and said, "This is a deserted place, and the hour is now late. Send the crowds away so that they may go into the villages and buy food for themselves." Jesus said to them, "They need not go away. You give them something to eat." They replied, "We have nothing here but 5 loaves and 2 fish." And he said, "Bring them here to me." Then he ordered the crowds to sit down on the grass. Taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, he looked up to heaven and blessed and broke the loaves and gave them to the disciples. And the disciples gave them to the crowds. And all ate and were filled. And they took up what was left over of the broken pieces, 12 baskets full. And those who ate were about 5,000 men, besides women and children. This is the word of God for the people of God. Would you bow your heads with me? Loving God, let this message today be yours. Let our hearts be centered on you. Let what you need to say come through. And help me not to get in the way. Amen. So our text for today is likely a familiar one for many of us. It's a very popular one to preach and teach on, and it shows up in all 4 of the Gospels. It's actually the only miracle that shows up in all 4 of the Gospels, which is an immediate sign that we know it's really important. And I don't know about you, but when I am reading the Bible or really anything, or especially if I am trying to prepare for a sermon, I like to picture things. I'm a visual learner, and so I am trying to get a picture in my head of what's going on here. And sometimes for that, I'll look up maybe paintings of it or sculptures. There's all kinds of biblical art out there. And so as I was reading this, I was getting the picture in my head, and it went along well with all of the art that I found. I had a lovely image in my head of all this nice, sunny, late afternoon on a hillside. It's just getting a little bit dusky. There's all these people sitting comfortably, and they're all praying to hear, and sometimes maybe whispering, "Oh, what did he say?" or "What does that mean?" Or their kids running around and enjoying themselves, and the disciples and Jesus are happily handing out food and just having a lovely time. And I do love this image of Jesus' ministry, this generosity and the joy that comes with that. But I was reading this a few times, and something about that seemed not quite right. Something about that picture seemed a little bit off. And I think it's because of the beginning of our text for today. See, the beginning, it starts off a little odd, I'll admit. And I had to read a couple of times to understand maybe why it's included with this section of text. Because the beginning, it just refers to some news that Jesus has gotten. He's heard something, and suddenly he's withdrawing. This is why it's always important to read around your text, what happens before and after, because just before this, the author tells of the death of John the Baptist. He'd been imprisoned for some time at this point, but suddenly King Herod, the ruler of the area, had a banquet for his birthday. And he'd been so impressed by a young woman who was dancing that he had promised her whatever she wanted. And she had demanded that he kill John the Baptist. So Jesus has just heard of this terrible news. And I think having just found that out, he's probably not in the mental state that I was picturing. Jesus begins, I think, very fairly by withdrawing from everyone. He has suffered a really painful loss. John the Baptist, if you'll remember, is Jesus' cousin, and he's really close in age. Their mothers were pregnant at the same time. Mary, Jesus' mother, went to John's mother, Elizabeth, when she was pregnant, when she needed someone for support. They're only about 6 or so months apart, and I imagine that they were kind of close as kids when they'd get together. As they grew up, it was John who paved the way for Jesus, announcing his coming. It was John who baptized Jesus in the Jordan River. John who bore witness as God claimed Jesus as the Son. Jesus has not only lost a member of his family, a close member of his family, he's lost a dear friend, He's lost a partner in ministry. He's probably lost one of the few people who understands what it's like to have a deep calling on your life and the challenges that come with needing to follow that. Jesus is, in a sense, a state of deep grief. He is pained. This is a side that we don't often talk about, a very human side of Jesus. And sometimes when we want to talk about Jesus' human side, we think of when he's flipping tables and angry. But this really is the human part of Jesus that I find kind of comforting. This is the part of him that knows what it's like to lose someone you love. This is the part of him that knows how grief feels for us. This is the part of him that can relate when we're struggling, when we're grieving and pained. This is the side of him that knows us as only humans can. And though he tries to take this time for himself, he withdraws, he makes an effort to get some space. He's interrupted by crowds who have heard that he's in the area, and now they're pursuing him. And while he's had his private time, Jesus has, for all the humanity that we have just seen, in him needing to be by himself, in the pain that he's holding, I think he reminds us in beautiful little ways of the depth of his love here, in a way that is truly, I think, divine, because he sees all these people. He has asked to be away, he has tried to be alone, and now he's being interrupted, and he looks out on these crowds. And I don't know about you, but when I am hurting and when I have asked to be alone and somebody comes to bother me, I'm probably going to say, can you come bother me later? Can you please just let me have this moment, especially if I were in Jesus' shoes, if I had just lost someone who's probably like a sibling, someone who is my dear friend who has been my confidant. If I've lost that person, I'm probably going to say, can you just wait for a sermon tomorrow? Can you wait for a lesson another day? Do you have to come right now? But Jesus doesn't do that. He hears of these crowds. He looks out among the people, and he has compassion for them. That is not easy to do. That takes a lot of overcoming that pain. That takes a lot of willingness to love even in the midst of hurting. One translation that I read said that he saw the people and he felt deeply for them. Even in the midst of his own hurt, he felt love for others. And he put that love into action. That compassion that leads him not to turn everyone away. That compassion that leads him to go forth into the crowd and start healing people. There are a million possible things that could have stood in the way of this miracle, in this way of this text. There are so many roadblocks if you choose to see them. Jesus is emotional at this point. It's late in the day, the timing is bad, so the location is also not ideal, and there just does not seem to be enough food. Everybody has been counting it up, and there just really doesn't seem to be enough. And the disciples are starting to wonder if Jesus has noticed all of this. They've waited until the end of the day, and they're kind of coming in and going, okay, well, we think it's time to go. We weren't so sure you were going to let all these folks in to begin with, and now it's time to send them home. They need to go get dinner. And I wonder if they had kind of looked at all of this, if they had already, because they know as soon as Jesus says, well, what food do we have? They've already checked. They've done an inventory. They have seen what is available. And I wonder if they were already starting to go, I don't think this is going to be enough for the 13 of us. Maybe we should go get some dinner. Maybe they were ready to move along as well. But Jesus hears all of this. He listens to their issues, and he kind of ignores them. He pushes past all of their doubts, and he answers with compassion, and he just says, we've got enough. It's okay. He's teaching the disciples the importance of caring for the community that they're in. He's teaching them that the things that they are worried about, the things of, is this going to be enough? Are we sure this is going to be okay? The scarcity that they have in their heads, that's not the most important thing, that it's supposed to be about the care that they're showing. And Jesus, to really drive the point home, that the scarcity that they have been so concerned about is really not a scarcity at all, Jesus decides to have a feast. That's basically what he does here, is he creates a feast. He started off with grief. He's had that privately. And now that the folks have shown up, he's chosen to be with them. He's chosen to be among the people, and specifically, he has chosen to have a meal with them. Sharing a meal with people can be deeply healing during grief. We know this, right? We do this in churches. We do this especially in the South. Who here has been to a meal after a funeral where you go see the family and then you share stories and you talk about your loved one and you look at old pictures and it's wonderful and it's sweet and it's sad and it's all these things all at once, but there's something lovely about being with other people. And there's something about a meal that always brings people in. We always seem to do that, have these big things. Or at very, very least, we set up a meal train or we drop off food at somebody's house. We always seem to gravitate toward food, toward feeding people. And have you ever noticed that in situations like that, when we're dropping off food or when we're having something like a potluck, especially to take care of someone, have you noticed that the food never seems to run out? There actually always seems to somehow be way more than we bargained for. Everybody was supposed to bring one dish and they've all somehow brought two. And there are so many leftovers at the end. There are green beans to put in the Tupperware, or if you're like my family, you put it in the sour cream containers, or there's fried chicken to put in the Ziplocs to take home, or there's casseroles that haven't even been touched yet that you can freeze and they can eat later. And we may not call it such, but we've seen the miracle of feeding at a potluck before. The way that meal always seems to cover everybody's plate. There always seems to be something that everybody will eat. And there is something nourishing about being in that space, about sharing that meal with other people. There's something that nourishes us, not just our stomachs. There's something nourishing for our souls, especially when we're grieving about getting to be with others. I think that's kind of what Jesus was doing. He's had his private time to grieve. And now he's basically created their potluck dinner. He'll have his grief with others. And he'll use that compassion to care for everyone he comes into contact with. He is showing the disciples that having faith, holding that in community, and combining that faith with compassion, that creates abundance. Abundance that they had no expectation of, that they could never anticipate. And this is not abundance in a prosperity gospel kind of way. This is not if you give a bunch of money, then good things will happen to you if you pray for it. No. The abundance that we see here is abundance that comes in all kinds of different forms, and it starts with grace. When we combine our faith with compassion, when we put our love into action for other people, We experience grace. We share that grace with everyone around us. And we can see the results multiplied. We've seen this. We've all experienced this. At a previous church where I served, there was a diaper bank. And I loved this ministry right from the start because it was really fun. I love babies. I like to go see everybody. People would bring their kids through the drive-thru to pick up their diapers. It was a blast. But I noticed quickly that these folks were not what I expected. Most of the people who were coming through were low income. They had a strain on their finances and their resources, and so things were tight for them. But I was impressed by how many of them would come through, and as their kids grew up, they would show up with unopened containers of formula, or clothes that their kid had grown out of, or toys that their kid wasn't playing with anymore, or diapers that they had never even opened that their kid couldn't wear because they'd grown so fast. And they would bring all these things back and they would offer them to the next family, to whoever else needed it. These folks whose finances were scarce weren't worried about trying to sell whatever they had to make it a little bit easier. They were generous and they were offering whatever they had because they knew that it was an extra blessing and they had something that they could give. There was abundance because people cared about this ministry and put things in, and because these people showed love back, and it went in a cycle. And it just helped more and more folks. We saw this yesterday with our back to school bash. As Ashley was saying, we helped over 800 kids get school supplies, which is incredible. We saw over 1,100 people. I was doing the little clicker as people came in, and I stopped clicking at 1,114, and then there were like 20 or so more people that came in after that. And not a single one of them was turned away. People love to hear, like, oh, how fast do we run out of things? And we didn't run out, which is a really good thing, because everybody who came to us for school supplies got what they needed for school supplies. They were able to take things home. Every kid who wanted a backpack got one. And I couldn't help but look at the school supplies yesterday as we were boxing it up, the things that were left, and think about the baskets of leftovers from a meal like this when everybody is served. I couldn't help but think how it just seemed like, people just kept coming and coming and coming, and it seemed like we would drain all of our resources when we ran out of food, or when we ran out of shoe vouchers, or when we went right past 12 o'clock. It seemed like there were all these reasons maybe we should stop the line, or if the event, we'd gotten to the end time, what if the volunteers needed to leave? But our compassion and our faith were far more than any of those questions about whether we should shut down. And there were never really big questions. They were, oh no, what do we do now that we're out of food? And the answer was, we just keep giving. And we keep being met with gratitude and love. And we keep being reminded that as long as we're showing compassion, as long as we are putting our love into action, there will be enough for those who come to Christ. There will be enough. And this is true for us in all that we do, in all of our missions, in all of our activities. When we're willing to let our faith and compassion guide what we do, we will always be amazed at the abundance of blessings that God pours out. Even when it's hard, even when we're grieving, God is with us, and God will bring us abundance. Amen.
You are the bread and the wine, single source of life. Only you satisfy everything. Well, there won't run dry the everlasting tide. One drop and I'm revived. Everything. All I need, all I need, all I need is you, is you. The table's open now. We belong, we're found. You gave us heaven's thought. Glory, glory. All I need, all I need, all I need is you. Rise like the morning sun, set on this place for love. Praise be your welcome song. Oh, 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 oh. Burn through the atmosphere, open the heavens here. Praise be your welcome song. Oh, 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 oh. Praise like the morning sun, open the place for love. Praise be your welcome song. Oh, 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 oh. Burn through the atmosphere, open the heavens here. Praise be your welcome song. Oh, 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 all I need, all I need, all I need is you, is you.